My name is Evelyn Mercer. I am 58 years old. And for most of my adult life, people in Seattle knew me as the woman who could walk into a dying hotel and see the life still hiding inside its walls. I built Mercer Heritage Hotels from one bankrupt inn on the Oregon coast into a network of 9 historic properties across Washington and Oregon. I restored burned staircases, negotiated with banks that expected me to fail, and convinced investors that cracked plaster and water-stained ceilings were not liabilities if you understood what they had once been. By the time I married Blake Harrington, I had already survived 2 recessions, a lawsuit, a hotel fire, and 17 years of raising my daughter Claire alone. I thought I knew what danger looked like. I was wrong. Danger did not come through my front door carrying a weapon. It slept beside me. It poured my tea. It reminded me to take my pills. And one rainy Thursday night, it discussed my destruction in Japanese because it believed I could not understand a word. The dinner took place at Astor House, a private restaurant on the 34th floor of a glass tower overlooking downtown Seattle. The windows stretched from the dark carpet to the ceiling, turning the city lights into blurred gold beneath the rain. Blake had arranged the evening to impress Riina Kuroda, a Japanese investor who represented a private development firm based in Tokyo. She was considering what Blake described as a strategic partnership with my company. That was the official explanation. The truth was sitting directly in front of me, wearing a cream silk suit and touching my husband's wrist whenever she laughed. Riina was 44, elegant, precise and beautiful in the kind of way that made other people sit straighter around her. She spoke perfect English, but when the server left the room she switched to Japanese. I had lived in Kyoto for 9 years when I was young. I studied architectural conservation at Kyoto University, worked with preservation teams in Osaka and Nagoya, and negotiated contracts in Japanese long before I ever opened my first hotel. Blake knew I had lived there. He did not know I had become fluent. Early in our marriage, I had ordered food in Japanese at a small restaurant in Vancouver. Blake laughed and called my accent adorable. He assumed I had memorized a few phrases. I never corrected him. At the time it seemed harmless. 10 years later, that omission saved my life. Blake sat beside me, his hand resting lightly on the back of my chair. "You should eat more," he said. "You barely touched lunch." I wasn't hungry. "You haven't been hungry much lately." His tone was soft, patient, concerned. It was the voice he used in front of witnesses. He picked up a piece of black cod with his chopsticks and held it near my mouth. "Come on, Evie." I felt Riina watching. I opened my mouth and took the bite. Blake smiled as if he had done something noble. "She has been having difficult days," he told Riina. "I am sitting right here," I said. He placed his hand over mine. "I know, sweetheart." His fingers tightened. "Memory problems," he continued. "Confusion, some balance issues." Riina's expression shifted into polite sympathy. "I am sorry to hear that. I am not confused," I said. Blake gave her a strained smile. "She doesn't always realize when it happens. There are humiliations so subtle that no one in the room feels responsible for them. A hand covering yours. A husband answering a question meant for you. A sympathetic glance from a stranger. Each moment seems too small to challenge. Together they form a cage." Riina lifted her wineglass and switched to Japanese. "How long until Belle files the report?" Blake answered in the same language. "Monday if she has another public episode." My heartbeat slowed, not raced, slowed. It was as if my body understood before my mind did that panic would be dangerous. I lowered my eyes to my plate. Riina continued, "And the dosage, I increased it 4 days ago. Any effect?" "She forgot the housekeeper's name yesterday." "That may not be enough for a judge. It will be." "Belle says her blood work can be explained as age-related decline combined with anxiety." Riina smiled. "What about the board?" "They already think she is unstable. After the gala, they support emergency control." I moved my left hand toward my water glass and deliberately missed it. My fingers brushed the stem. Blake immediately guided my hand. "Careful," he said in English. Then in Japanese he added, "See." Riina looked at me as if I were an antique chair with a broken leg. "And after the court gives you control, we sell Mercer Heritage operations to your group for $29 million. You get the hotels, the brand and the Japanese travel contract, and Evelyn. There's a private memory facility outside Spokane." "How soon?" "Immediately after closing." Riina's lips curved. "Far from Seattle. That's the idea." I heard every word. The medication, the judge, the company, the facility. For months I had been forgetting things. Appointments disappeared from my calendar. Contracts appeared in places I did not remember putting them. I woke with headaches so heavy that sound felt sharp. Twice I stumbled on the stairs. Each time Blake was there, he caught my elbow, he brought water. He handed me capsules from a blue bottle and said Dr. Bell had adjusted my supplements. "You're under too much stress," he would tell me. "Let me take care of you." And because he was my husband, I believed him. That was the most difficult truth to accept later. Not that Blake had lied, but that he had used my trust as part of the mechanism. A stranger would never have convinced me to swallow pills without reading the label. My husband did it every night. Rihanna picked up her sake cup. "Does she know about us?" Blake glanced at me. I allowed my eyes to drift toward the rain. "She barely knows what day it is." Rihanna laughed softly. "What about Claire? She won TB a problem, you're certain." IV kept them apart for almost a year. How? Emails, messages. I told Claire her mother wanted distance. I told Evelyn that Claire only cared about the inheritance. The fork in my hand became very still. Claire was my only child. We had not spoken in 8 months. Our last conversation ended with her saying, "I don't know who you are anymore, Mom." I had believed Blake when he told me Claire was angry about the company trust. I had believed him when he said she refused to visit. I had believed him when he showed me short, cold messages that seemed to come from her number. Now I understood. He had not merely tried to take my business. He had removed the one person most likely to notice what was happening to me. Rihanna leaned closer to him. "When this is over, you'll finally stop being Mr. Mercer." Blake's mouth tightened. "I was never Mr. Mercer." "That's what people called you." "Because she made sure everyone knew the company was hers. You married a powerful woman." "I married someone who enjoyed reminding me she was powerful." I looked at the man beside me. 10 years earlier, Blake had been 42, charming, recently divorced, and nearly bankrupt after a failed commercial real estate deal. I had paid off the most dangerous portion of his debt. I gave him a position in my company. I introduced him to bankers who would not return his calls. I never thought of that as power. I thought of it as partnership. Apparently, he had experienced my help as humiliation. The server entered with dessert. Blake changed languages immediately. "Evelyn loves chocolate," he said. "I used to, you still do." He moved the plate closer to me. I looked at the dark glaze and wondered whether he had arranged my medication through the restaurant too. "I am tired," I said. His relief was almost visible. "Of course you are." Rihanna smiled. "You should rest." Then she spoke in Japanese. "Enjoy sleeping at home while you still can." I lifted my eyes to hers for 1 second, no more. Then I let my expression soften into confusion. "Did you say something?" Blake and Rihanna exchanged a glance. "No," Rihanna said in English, "nothing important." That was the moment I chose not to confront them. People imagine courage as a dramatic act. A slammed hand, a raised voice, a public accusation. But courage is not always loud. Sometimes courage is sitting across from the people planning to erase you and pretending not to understand. Sometimes it is finishing dessert. Sometimes it is allowing your husband to help you into your coat, while you decide how to destroy the story he has built around you. During the drive home, Blake kept both hands on the steering wheel. Seattle moved around us in wet reflections. Traffic lights bled red and green across the windshield. I waited until we crossed the Fremont Bridge. "Blake, yes." "What did Rihanna say about a judge?" His head turned slightly. "What, at dinner?" "She didn't say anything about a judge. I thought I heard the word. You don't speak Japanese, I know." "Then how could you know what she said?" I looked down at my hands. "I am not sure." His voice softened. "Evelyn, this is what Dr. Bell warned us about." "What did he warn us about?" "Your brain is trying to make patterns from things you don't understand." Was she talking about a care facility? The car moved toward the edge of the lane. Blake corrected it sharply. "No." "I thought she was talking about a hospitality facility near Spokane. And a sale," he exhaled. "You heard isolated words and created a frightening story. That is exactly what happened last week when you accused Maria of moving your files. My files were moved. You put them in the linen closet. I don't remember doing that." "I know," he said it gently. That gentleness frightened me more than anger would have. He reached across the console and placed his hand on my knee. "You're scared, I understand that. But you need to trust the people trying to help you. Dr. Bell, yes, you, especially me." I turned toward the window. Rainwater twisted across the glass. "How long have you been speaking to Dr. Bell without me? I am your husband. That wasn't my question. His hand withdrew. You've missed appointments. I never missed appointments before you began managing my calendar. His jaw tightened. There you go again, doing what? Turning concern into conspiracy. The accusation was perfectly designed. If I argued, I was paranoid. If I cried, I was unstable. If I remained quiet, I was confused. Blake had created a version of reality in which every possible response became evidence against me. I lowered my head. I am sorry. His body relaxed. You don't need to apologize. He reached for my hand again. Let me handle things for a while. I gave him the weak smile he wanted. Maybe you're right. By the time we reached our home in Queen Anne, Blake believed he had regained control. Our house sat on a hill above the city, all dark cedar, stone and tall windows. I had restored it 14 years earlier. The oldest part of the structure dated to 1908. The irony did not escape me. I had spent my life preserving buildings, while failing to notice the rot inside my own marriage. Blake parked in the garage and came around to open my door. Careful, he said, the pavement was dry. He still held my arm as we walked inside. At the bottom of the stairs, I deliberately placed my foot incorrectly and caught the railing. For half a second, Blake smiled. It vanished almost immediately, replaced by concern, but I saw it. He was pleased. He did not fear my decline, he needed it. Go upstairs, he said. I'll bring your pills, I want to sit in the design room. Why, I don't remember. Suspicion sharpened his face, then he laughed softly. All right. 5 minutes, the design room had once been my private office. The drafting table still held faded blueprints from my earliest hotels. Tall cabinets lined the walls, filled with architectural sketches, legal documents and restoration photographs. Blake rarely entered. He considered it a room full of old paper. That was why I had kept my emergency phone there, years earlier. After a contractor threatened me during a lawsuit. My attorney Marisol Vega insisted I maintain a secure phone, disconnected from my normal accounts. I had hidden it behind the false back of a lacquered Japanese cabinet. The moment the door closed, I crossed the room and pulled out the lowest drawer. Behind it sat the phone, an old passport, a backup credit card, and a photograph of Claire at 22. She was standing outside the Briar house on reopening day, laughing into the wind. I touched the picture. Then I turned on the phone and called Marisol. She answered on the 4th ring. Who is this? It's Evelyn. Silence, then her voice changed. Evelyn, my God, where have you been? I closed my eyes. Blake said you retired. He told me you fired me. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Then I said, my husband is trying to have me declared mentally incompetent. Marisol did not gasp. She did not tell me I must be mistaken. She simply asked, what evidence do you have? Tonight I heard him discussing it with Rina Kuroda. How? They spoke Japanese. Another pause. Blake doesn't know you fluent, no. That may be the first good news I've heard. I think he's drugging me. Her voice became colder. Do not take anything else he gives you. He'll watch. Pretend, keep the pills if you can. Do not confront him, do not sign anything. Footsteps approached the room. Find Nolan Price, I whispered. The forensic investigator. Yes, and Daniel Cho, our old internal auditor. I need to know what Blake has moved out of the company. The door handle turned. Evelyn, Marisol said, listen to me. You may be in physical danger. I know. Can you leave tonight? No. If I leave now, he'll accelerate the guardianship petition and tell everyone I am unstable. That's a risk, so is warning him. The door began to open. Find out what he's giving me, I said. And contact Claire without using any number Blake knows. I ended the call and slipped the phone back into the cabinet. Blake entered carrying 3 pale blue capsules and a glass of water. There you are, he said. I looked at the pills. Are those the same ones? Of course, what are they called? He smiled. You ask me every night. I do, yes, he held out his palm, come on. I placed the capsules in my mouth, drank and pretended to swallow. Blake watched my throat. Only after he kissed my forehead and left did I remove the pills from beneath my tongue. I wrapped them in tissue and hid them beside the phone. That night I lay in bed next to the man who was poisoning me. Blake slept deeply. I did not sleep at all. Every memory of our marriage changed shape in the dark. The times he offered to organize my medication. The mornings he insisted I stay home. The meetings he cancelled because I was too tired. The messages from Claire that sounded crueler than her voice had ever been. I wanted to wake him. I wanted to ask him how much of my life had been real. Instead, I listened to him breathe and reminded myself that pain was not evidence. Anger was not strategy. I needed facts strong enough to survive his lies. The following morning, A white van marked Northwest Environmental Services pulled into our driveway. Marisol had chosen the cover carefully. For months, Blake had told friends that I imagined chemical smells and smoke inside the house. An environmental inspection would support his version of events rather than threaten it. Nolan Price stood at the front door wearing work boots and carrying a metal case. He was in his early 50s, broad-shouldered, grey-haired and deliberately forgettable. Blake opened the door early. I had a cancellation. My wife has been complaining about odours. Nolan glanced at me. What kind? I don't know, I said. Sweet, sometimes metallic. Blake sighed. There's nothing there. Nolan gave him a neutral smile. That's what testing is for. I had already signed digital authorization through the secure phone, giving Nolan permission to inspect shared areas of the home, analyze my medication, and review security systems registered in my name. He began in the kitchen. Blake poured me tea. Drink this, he said. You look foggy. I lifted the cup and smelled the faint sweetness that had become familiar. Then I deliberately knocked a spoon onto the floor. When Blake bent to pick it up, I slid the cup closer to Nolan's equipment case. Nolan did not look at me. He simply placed a collection strip against the rim while pretending to test air near the counter. Where are medications stored? He asked. Upstairs, Blake said. My wife forgets which supplements she takes. I don't forget, I replied. Blake gave Nolan an exhausted look. This is what I mean. Nolan wrote something on his clipboard. To Blake, it looked like another professional documenting my decline. To me, it meant he had heard everything. When Blake stepped outside to take a call, Nolan spoke without moving his lips. Which bottle? Blue, bathroom cabinet, anything else? Matching capsules in the pantry, he nodded once. For the next 40 minutes, Nolan moved through the house without entering any area outside my legal authority. He photographed supplement labels, collected residue from the tea, and copied the administrative log from the security system. Blake had registered himself as the sole remote user. He received alerts whenever I opened the medicine cabinet, the design room, the garage, or the exterior doors. He had told me the cameras were for my safety in case I fell. In reality, he was monitoring whether I moved beyond the life he had arranged for me. Control often introduces itself as protection. Before Nolan left, he installed several air quality monitors in shared rooms. 2 contained lawful recording equipment approved by Marisol. This may take several visits, he told Blake. Do whatever you need, Blake replied. Wealth had made him careless around people wearing uniforms. He saw a technician. He did not see a witness. 2 days later, Marisol called me through the secure phone. I locked the design room door. What did the lab find? The capsules contain a combination of sedatives and compounds known to cause confusion, short-term memory disruption, muscle weakness, and poor balance. My hand tightened around the phone. Prescribed, not to you. What about the tea? The same sedative, lower concentration. I sat down. How long? We can prove duration yet. I've been taking them for months. I believe you. Those words nearly broke me. I believe you. It had been so long since anyone said them without hesitation. Marisol continued. Daniel found 4 shell companies receiving money from Mercer Heritage restoration budgets. Total so far is just under 1.8 million, linked to Blake. Approved through accounts he controls, and Renee. 2 mailing addresses connect to her investment firm. I pressed my fingers against my forehead. We should call the police, Marisol said. Not yet. Evelyn Blake will say Belle prescribed the medication. Belle will call my accusation paranoia. Rihanna will return to Japan. The board will remember only that I've been confused. We have lab results. We need intent. Marisol exhaled. You want them to explain the plan in their own voices. Yes, that is dangerous. So is allowing them to choose the story. That evening, the recorder in Blake's downstairs office captured his call with Rihanna. I sat in the dark design room wearing headphones. Rihanna spoke first. Belle says the petition needs stronger public evidence. He'll have it, Blake replied. The preservation gala is Friday. She is scheduled to speak. Yes, can she manage it? She'll take the full dose before we leave, and if she refuses, she won tea. Papers shifted. After the gala, I'll have video from 200 witnesses. Belle files Monday. Emergency authority by the end of the week, and the transaction. 29 million for Mercer Heritage operations. Rihanna laughed. A company projected to receive a $132 million Japanese tourism contract. Exactly. Does Evelyn know about the Kasumi agreement? She probably approved it and forgot. What about ownership schedules? I run the company, I know what it owns. That sentence told me how to defeat him. Blake managed the operating company. He approved payroll, renovations, marketing, and vendor contracts. But he did not understand the structure beneath the business. Mercer Heritage Hotels was not one company, it was a network. The operating entity managed the hotels, but it did not own most of the land. The buildings were held separately. The trademarks belonged to a licensing company. The art and historic interiors belonged to a non-profit foundation. The reservation software was owned by another entity. I had built the structure that way years earlier to protect the properties from lawsuits and hostile buyers. Blake had never cared. He saw only revenue. He assumed being close to the machinery meant he understood how it worked. Rhianna's voice came through the headphones. Once we close the Briar houses first, what will you do with it, luxury condominiums? The preservation board may object. Once we control the company, we replace the board, and the employees, severance, Blake laughed, they'll survive. I removed the headphones. For one terrible moment, I wanted revenge more than justice. I imagined Blake losing everything. Rhianna watching her money disappear, Dr. Bell standing in court. Then I remembered the employees, 9 hotels. More than 700 people. Some had worked with me for 20 years. If I acted recklessly, they would pay for my anger, so I called Marisol. I need to activate the Cedar Legacy Trust. Silence. That mechanism was created for a hostile takeover. This is a hostile takeover. It will separate the operating company from the assets, yes. If Blake closes on Mercer Heritage operations after the transfers, the buyer will acquire the liabilities without the core assets. Yes. Marisol understood. You're going to let them buy it. I am going to let them buy exactly what the documents say they're rebuying. The gala took place at the Briar House, my favorite property. The hotel had been built in 1912 and abandoned for nearly 30 years before I purchased it. When I first walked inside, rain fell through holes in the roof. Pigeons nested in the ballroom. Half the carved staircase had been burned in a fire. Everyone told me to demolish it. I spent 6 years restoring it. By Friday night, the ballroom glowed beneath chandeliers reconstructed from old photographs. White flowers filled the tables. A jazz quartet played near the stained glass windows. 200 guests attended. Blake wanted them to witness my collapse. I intended to give him exactly what he expected. Before we left home, he handed me 3 capsules. I pretended to swallow them. At the hotel, he fastened a diamond necklace around my throat. You don't have to speak tonight, he said. I wrote the speech. That was before your condition worsened. My condition, he met my eyes in the mirror. Don't make this difficult, I can still read. No one said you couldn't. His tone was patient, but I saw the calculation behind it. If you lose your place, people may become upset, people or you. His fingers paused against the clasp, everyone. After he left the dressing room, I opened the speech. He had replaced it. Dates were wrong, names were misspelled, sentences repeated. One paragraph referred to an anniversary that had not happened. If I read it badly, I looked confused. If I objected, I looked paranoid. Blake had prepared both the lie and my possible reactions. I folded the pages and placed them in my bag. Then I walked downstairs and began my performance. I called Arthur Pembroke, one of our oldest investors, by his dead brother's name. His smile collapsed. I am Arthur Evelyn. I stared at him for 2 seconds. Of course, I am sorry. Blake appeared immediately. She's tired. Arthur touched my shoulder. Don't worry about it. But pity had entered his eyes. 10 minutes later, I asked a server where the restroom was, even though I had designed the corridor. Then I wandered toward the service entrance and allowed 3 board members to watch Blake redirect me. This way, sweetheart. When I reached the stage, the room became quiet. I unfolded the false speech. 26 years ago, we opened the Briar House. A murmur moved through the crowd. The Briar House had reopened 18 years earlier. I frowned at the paper. No, 28. Blake stood near the stage with concern arranged carefully across his face. I skipped a line, repeated another. Called the Mercer Preservation Foundation by the wrong name. Every mistake hurt. These were people who had once trusted me with millions of dollars. Employees who had seen me lead through fire, bankruptcy, and renovation disasters. Now they watched as if I might forget where I was. Humiliation is a strange form of pain. It burns even when you choose it. Halfway through the speech, I looked toward the ballroom doors. Claire should be here. The room became still. Blake climbed onto the stage. Evelyn, he said softly, taking the pages from my hands. She promised to help with the flowers. Claire lives in Chicago, she's 17, several people looked away, Claire was 32. Blake placed his arm around me and faced the audience. I am sorry. Some evenings are more difficult than others. The guests applauded as he guided me from the stage, not because I had finished. Because they wanted to rescue me from the silence. In the hallway, Blake's hand tightened around my arm. What were you thinking? I wanted to speak. You humiliated both of us, did I? You could barely form a sentence. I am sorry, his anger faded. That's why you need to let me handle things. Rihanna arrived 20 minutes later wearing silver. She listened as Blake described my performance to the board. Then she found me sitting near the conservatory. You were very brave, she said in English. I gave her a blank smile. She crouched beside me and switched to Japanese. Though I expected something more dramatic. I stared through the glass at the rain. After tonight, she continued, no judge will doubt Blake. She leaned closer. The Briar house will be the first property we sell. My fingers tightened beneath the table. The land is worth more without the building. Blake joined us with champagne. She's ready, he said in Japanese. Bell files Monday and the company. Once I have temporary authority, we close. 29 million, yes, Rihanna smiled. The Kasumi contract alone makes it worth 4 times that. Blake raised his glass. To no longer being Evelyn Mercer's husband, they drank. I lowered my head so they would not see the anger in my face. That night, after Blake fell asleep, I went to the design room and spread the corporate ownership maps across the drafting table. The operating company sat at the center. Mercer Heritage Operations LLC. Blake believed it owned everything. I began circling the assets it did not own. The 9 hotel properties, the trademark, the reservation system, the architectural archives. The art collection, the historic furniture, the licensing rights. The Japanese tourism agreement with Kasumi Travel Group. By dawn, Mercer Heritage Operations had become what it truly was. Management company carrying payroll, vendor obligations, debt, maintenance commitments, employee protections and guest refund liabilities. It had revenue. It also had more than $31 million in contractual obligations. The value Blake and Rihanna wanted existed outside it. I drove to Marisol's office the next morning. Daniel Cho had already covered the conference table with financial binders. Marisol studied the ownership chart. 8 properties sit in separate real estate companies, she said. The 9th is under a preservation covenant. Daniel opened another binder. The trademark belongs to Mercer Heritage Licensing. The reservation platform belongs to MHL Systems. The art belongs to the foundation, and Kasumi, I asked. Daniel slid a folder toward me. The agreement is with the foundation and licensing company. Mercer Heritage Operations is named only as the current manager. What happens if Operations changes ownership? The contract terminates automatically unless Kasumi gives written approval. Will they? No, Marisol looked at me. You understand that we cannot hide any of this from the buyer. I don't want to hide it. They will receive full disclosure schedules. Yes, and if they read them, they can walk away. Daniel leaned back. You think they won tea, I know Blake. Marisol's gaze sharpened. This isn't a trick, Evelyn. The documents must be precise. They will be every debt listed. Yes. Every change of control provision. Yes. Every asset excluded. Yes. I looked at the Kasumi proposal. The cover page showed a projected value of $132 million over 7 years. The ownership restrictions appeared deeper in the document. Any competent buyer would read them. Any responsible lawyer would demand time. But Blake and Rihanna were no longer making decisions based on competence. They were making decisions based on greed. Marisol placed a white envelope in front of me. There's something else. Inside were printed emails addressed to Claire. They appeared to come from my account. Claire, I do not want you involved in my medical care. You have made your interest in the trust painfully clear. Please stop contacting me. My name appeared at the bottom. I had written none of them. Marisol placed another stack beside the first. These are Claire's replies. Blake intercepted them. I read the most recent. Mom, I don't want the hotels. I don't want your money. I just want to understand why you stopped loving me. I could not breathe. Money could be traced. Contracts could be reversed. Property could be restored. Time had no legal remedy. Blake had stolen months between my daughter and me and hidden the theft inside our old wounds. Where is Claire? I asked, still in Chicago. Does she know? Not yet. Call her. I have. My head lifted. She's flying here tomorrow. I looked down at Claire's message. Does she believe me? She doesn't know what to believe. That hurt, but I deserved it. Blake had manipulated us, but he had used distance that already existed. Claire and I had argued about the company for years. She believed I loved the hotels more than I loved her. Sometimes she was right. I'll earn her trust, I said. Marisol nodded. But first we finish this. That night I carried a blue leather case into the house and left it open on the design room table. The Kasumi memorandum sat inside. The cover page displayed the projected $132 million value. I positioned the case beneath the lamp and left the door unlocked. Then I went upstairs and deliberately asked Blake whether it was Wednesday. It was Thursday, he corrected me. 20 minutes later I asked again. This time he recorded me on his phone. After midnight the security feed showed Blake entering the design room. He checked the hallway, opened the case, photographed the cover page. The revenue projection, the list of 9 hotels. He skimmed several summaries, but he never reached the change of control provisions. Within minutes he called Riane. I listened through Nolan's recorder. This is real, Blake whispered. How do you know? It came from Marisol's office. 132 million, over 7 years. If Kasumi signs, the value triples. That's why we close before the agreement becomes public. What about the guardianship? We don't need to wait. I'll get temporary financial authorization tomorrow. Riane was quiet. I can raise 29 million, but I'll have to use my Tokyo apartments and my family's investment account as collateral. Do it. There cannot be a mistake. They're 1TB, how certain are you? Blake laughed. She asked me twice what day it was. I sat in the dark with anger burning through my chest. I wanted to walk downstairs and speak to him in Japanese. I wanted to watch his face change. But if I frightened him, he might read the document. Patience was more difficult than confrontation. It was also more powerful. The next evening, Claire arrived in Seattle. We met at Marisol's office because I could not risk bringing her home. When she entered the conference room, I almost did not recognize her. She had cut her dark hair to her shoulders. She wore a black coat and carried no luggage except a small overnight bag. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Then she said, "Are you actually sick?" No, her face tightened. "You expect me to believe that after 8 months?" "I expect you to look at the evidence. Blake said you were paranoid, he drugged me," she stared. I placed the lab report on the table. Claire did not pick it up. "He said you accused Maria of stealing. He moved my files. He said you fired Marisol. He told Marisol I fired her." Her eyes filled, but her voice remained hard. "And the messages you sent me, I didn't he send them?" "Mom, I read your letters today." She stopped. "What letters?" "The ones Blake hid." Her face changed. "You got them?" "Not until now. I wrote 6, I know." I called. He changed the numbers on my phone. Claire turned away. I could see her trying to decide whether hope was safe. "He told me you said I only wanted the trust," she whispered. "He told me you refused to visit because I wouldn't give you control. I never asked for control. I know that now." She looked at me. "Do you?" The question struck deeper than anger. Claire had spent years believing the hotels came first because too often they had. "I should have called you directly," I said. "I should have questioned every message. I should not have allowed Blake to explain you to me. You always allowed other people to explain me. That's fair." She blinked. I had not defended myself. That surprised her. "I am sorry," I said. "Not only for what Blake did, for what made his lies believable." Claire sat down slowly. I moved toward her, then stopped. She needed control over the distance between us. "Are you in danger?" she asked. "Yes." "Then why are you still in that house?" "Because tomorrow Blake will force me to sign temporary authority. The day after that he and Riane will close the sale. You reletting them." "I am letting them complete the crime in front of investigators." Claire stared at me. "That sounds insane." "It may be. What happens if he hurts you?" "Nolan will be recording. State investigators will be close." "Close is not the same as there." "I know." She stood again. "No. You do not get to disappear for 8 months. Show me evidence that your husband is poisoning you. And then calmly explain that you re-going back into the house." "Claire, I already thought I lost you once." Her voice broke. "I am not doing it again." I crossed the room and stopped in front of her. "I need you to trust me for 48 hours. Trust you?" "Yes." She laughed bitterly. "That's convenient. I know. Why should I?" "Because I am not asking you to forget what happened between us. I am asking you to help me survive long enough to repair it." For several seconds. She looked like the 17-year-old girl who once waited outside an emergency room while I negotiated by phone with an investor. Then she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me. I held her so tightly that she whispered, "Mom, I can breathe." I laughed and cried at the same time. It was the first honest sound I had made in months. The next morning, Blake entered the breakfast room carrying a leather folder. I sat at the long table in my robe. A hidden camera inside the antique clock faced us. Blake placed the folder beside my coffee. Routine forms. What kind? Medical authorization, insurance, financial access. Why financial? In case you become confused during a meeting. I don't have a meeting. His smile tightened. Just sign. He sat beside me and opened the folder. The first page released medical records. The second authorized insurance communication. Beneath those were documents granting Blake temporary power of attorney. Control over my voting rights, access to company accounts, and authority to approve the sale of Mercer Heritage operations. Where? I asked. He placed a pen in my hand. Here. I let my fingers shake. I can hold it. Take your time. Maybe Marisol should read it. His expression froze. Marisol no longer represents you, she called me. Fear appeared in his eyes, then I frowned, or maybe I dreamed it. His shoulders relaxed. You dreamed it. He pushed the paper closer. Sign. What am I selling? Nothing. Why does it say Mercer Heritage? It's Routine Management Authority. I want to read it. You can read 3 pages without losing your place. His voice had changed. The patience disappeared. I built the company, I said. You used to run it. I still own it, not for much longer. The words escaped before he could stop them. I looked at him. What did you say? I said you won't have to worry much longer. He wrapped his fingers around my hand and pushed the pen toward the paper. Blake, you're hurting me. Then stop resisting. I want to read it. You don't understand it. It's mine. His grip tightened around my wrist. No, Evelyn, that is the problem. Everything has always been yours. The camera recorded his face. You made every decision. Every room we entered, people looked at you first. Do you know what it is like to spend years being introduced as Evelyn Mercer's husband? I thought you were proud of me. I said what you needed to hear. The sentence cut through me. He pushed harder. The pen scratched across the signature line. I gave you a place in the company, I whispered. You gave me a chair at your table and expected gratitude forever. I saved you from bankruptcy. And made sure everyone knew it. I never told anyone. You didn't have to. They knew whose money mattered. His face was inches from mine. I gave you 10 years of my life. The least you can do is leave me something worth having. He forced my hand down. I allowed the pen to create a broken version of my name. It looked nothing like my legal signature. Blake did not care. He made me sign each document. By the time he released me, a bruise was forming around my wrist. There, he said, that wasn't difficult. Are you angry with me? His expression softened immediately. No, sweetheart, the mask returned. I am protecting you. He kissed my forehead and carried the folder into his office. Through the recorder I heard him call Rianne. She signed, she understood. She didn't know what she was signing. Any resistance, I had to guide her hand. Rianne laughed. The money is in escrow. We close tomorrow night. Where? The Briar House. Why there? Because I want to celebrate in the building she loves most. And Evelyn. The transport company will take her directly to Northview Memory Care. I stared at the bruise on my wrist. Her room is ready, Blake said. The secure phone vibrated inside my robe. Nolan's message contained 6 words. We have everything. Investigators are ready. Marisol called next. They can arrest him now. Not yet. He assaulted you. Tomorrow Rianne appears in person. The funds move. Everyone signs. This is no longer only a financial case. I know. You may not get another chance to leave safely. If we arrest Blake now, Rianne will claim she was an innocent investor. The recordings contradict that. She fight extradition from Japan. Marisol was silent. I continued. Tomorrow she puts $29 million into the transaction. She signs the debt schedules. She speaks in front of witnesses. Then the conspiracy becomes one event no one can separate. Evelyn, I need this finished. No, you want it finished. She was right. There was a difference. I want my life back, I said. Marisol's voice softened. Then promise me you will follow the security plan exactly. I promise. After the call, I opened the back of my wardrobe. An ivory suit hung inside a garment bag. I had worn it 18 years earlier when the Briar House reopened. Claire had stood beside me in the rain while the ceremonial ribbon broke before we could cut it. I removed the suit. Blake appeared in the doorway. You re-wearing that tomorrow? I thought it might be nice. He smiled with quiet contempt. No one at the facility will care what you wear. I turned toward the mirror. You may be right. He left before he saw my face. The Cedar Legacy Trust became effective at 9 the following morning. In a records room beneath the Breyer House, I signed the final documents with Marisol, Daniel, 2 independent trustees, and a preservation attorney. The process was not dramatic, no music played, no one raised a glass. Real power rarely looks theatrical. It looks like numbered pages, verified signatures, witnesses, and language clear enough to survive court. I transferred voting control of the 8 real estate companies into the trust. The 9th hotel remained protected by a city preservation covenant. The Mercer Heritage trademark moved into the trust. So did the reservation system, customer database, restoration archives, licensing rights and ownership interests connected to the Kasumi Agreement. The art and historic furniture remained with the foundation. Mercer Heritage operations retained payroll, daily management contracts, vendor commitments, employee severance guarantees, refund obligations, renovation debt, and maintenance liabilities totaling just over $31 million. Nothing was hidden. Every obligation appeared in the buyer's disclosure schedules. Every excluded asset was listed. Every termination provision was stated clearly. If Rihanna's lawyers read the documents, they could stop the transaction. Marisol slid the final paper toward me. This name's a successor trustee. I saw Claire's name. She agreed she did. I looked at my daughter who stood near the doorway. Claire stepped forward. I don't want to run the hotels. You don't have to. I want to protect them. That is all the trust requires. She looked at the papers. And I want employees represented on the oversight board. Daniel smiled. That can be arranged. I signed beneath her name. For the first time in months, my hand did not shake. That evening, Blake insisted I arrive at the closing in a wheelchair. You were unsteady this afternoon, he said loudly enough for the driver to hear. I feel fine. You think you feel fine. He fastened the belt across my waist. I wore the ivory suit beneath a wool blanket. The bruise on my wrist had darkened. Did you take your pills? Yes, all three. Relief crossed his face. The pills were in an evidence bag with Nolan. When the Breyer House ballroom doors opened, 2 attendants rolled me inside. White orchids rose from crystal vases. Champagne chilled in silver buckets. A string quartet played beneath the restored ceiling mural. Blake had arranged the evening like a coronation. Rena stood near the signing table wearing a red silk gown. 2 attorneys stood beside her. An escrow officer reviewed documents. 3 board members waited near the windows. A photographer moved around the ballroom. Blake wanted evidence of a dignified transition. He had invited witnesses to his own crime. What he did not know was that Marisol watched from the adjacent library. State investigators were positioned throughout the hotel. 2 members of the catering staff were undercover officers. Rihanna approached me. Evelyn, I am so pleased you could attend. I looked past her. Is this Claire's wedding? Blake laughed softly. No, sweetheart. We were finishing some business. Rihanna bent close. In Japanese, she whispered, this is better than a wedding. Tonight we inherit a kingdom without waiting for the queen to die. I stared at the flowers. She straightened, satisfied. Blake took his place beneath the original Mercer Heritage emblem. He addressed the room. Tonight ensures stability for a company Evelyn devoted her life to building. Because of her health, she is no longer able to manage complex decisions. This transaction protects her legacy. I listened as my husband used the language of love to explain my removal. A convincing lie often borrows the vocabulary of care. Rihanna's attorney began reading the closing summary. Kuroda Urban Partners has deposited $29 million into escrow and waived the extended due diligence period. One of her younger attorneys shifted. Ms. Kuroda, I must confirm again that you wish to proceed without additional review. We have reviewed the essential materials, Rihanna said. The essential materials were photographs Blake had stolen from my briefcase. The attorney continued. The buyer accepts all disclosed debt, contractual obligations, employee guarantees, guest liabilities, maintenance commitments, and change of control provisions attached to Mercer Heritage Operations LLC. Rihanna did not look at the disclosure binder. Blake signed first using the authority he had forced from me. His signature was quick, confident. He did not read the property schedules. He did not ask why the hotels were listed under management contracts instead of ownership. He did not notice that the trademark license expired at midnight following a change in control. Greed had not made him blind. It had convinced him that careful reading was for people who lacked confidence. The escrow officer placed a tablet on my lap. Mrs. Mercer, the bank requires acknowledgement from the founder. I stared at the screen. Is this insurance? Blake crouched beside me. Yes. I don't remember, you don't have to. He placed his hand over my bruised wrist. The photographer's camera clicked. I'll help you. He pressed my thumb to the screen. A green mark appeared. The escrow officer watched her laptop. 10 seconds passed, then she nodded. The funds have been released. Transfer of Mercer Heritage Operations LLC is complete. Champagne corks burst. The quartet began playing. Rihanna threw her arms around Blake. He kissed her openly. The photographer captured them beneath my company's emblem. Rihanna raised her glass to Mercer Heritage. To our future, Blake corrected. They drank. Then Rihanna spoke in Japanese. Tomorrow we remove the old executives, and the Briar House, Blake asked. Luxury residences, the ballroom, a sales gallery. Blake glanced toward me. She'll never see it. Where is the transport team? Outside. He stepped behind my wheelchair and leaned toward my ear. Tomorrow, Evelyn, you'll wake up in a room without a view. Rihanna and I will wake up owning everything you built. I looked down at my hands. For 10 years. Those hands had touched his face, signed his loans, defended him to my daughter. And placed medication into my own mouth because he told me it was safe. Then Blake straightened. Take her out. One of the attendants reached for the wheelchair. I locked the wheels. He tried again. The chair did not move. Blake frowned. Evelyn. I unfastened the belt. The room quieted. I removed the blanket, placed both feet on the marble floor and stood. No shaking, no hesitation. Blake's champagne glass fell from his hand and shattered. Rihanna went pale. The quartet stopped in the middle of a note. I smoothed the front of my ivory jacket. Then I spoke in fluent Japanese. $29 million for a company carrying $31 million in disclosed obligations. Rihanna's lips parted. I continued. You should have read the attachments. No one moved. Blake stared at me as though I had climbed out of a grave he had already sealed. How much did you understand? Rihanna whispered in Japanese. Everything. Her face tightened. The dinner, the guardianship plan, the medication, Northview Memory Care, the stolen money. Your plan to demolish the Briar House. Blake stepped forward. Evelyn is confused. I turned to him. Am I? He looked around the room. This is part of her illness. She has moments of false clarity. Then perhaps we should listen to the recordings. Marisol entered from the side door. 2 investigators followed. Nolan connected a laptop to the ballroom sound system. Blake's voice filled the room. She's taking everything I give her, then Rihanna's. Once the judge gives you authority, we close. Another recording played. The Briar House becomes luxury residences. Then Blake's voice from the breakfast room. She didn't even know what she was signing. I had to guide her hand. The room seemed to shrink around him. One of the board members stepped away. Blake lunged toward the laptop. An investigator blocked him. This is private marital communication, Blake shouted. Marisol's voice remained calm. The recordings were made in shared areas of property owned by Mrs. Mercer, under legal authorization and in compliance with state requirements. Rihanna turned toward her attorneys. Stop the transfer. The escrow officer looked at her computer. The funds have been released. Reverse them. The transaction is complete. Rihanna grabbed the disclosure binder and began flipping through pages. Her hands shook. Where are the property deeds? Excluded assets, I said. The hotels, owned by separate entities controlled by the Cedar Legacy Trust. The brand, not part of the sale. The reservation system. Not part of the sale. The art foundation property, the Kasumi agreement. Terminated automatically upon change of control. She found the clause. Her face collapsed. No. It is on page 187. You knew. I knew you would receive the truth. You trapped us. No. You purchased exactly what the contract described. Blake turned toward me. You can do this. I already did. That company is mine. You bought an operating entity with liabilities exceeding the purchase price. You tricked me. I gave you the complete ownership schedules. You knew I wouldn't read them. Yes, his face twisted. For the first time, the polished husband disappeared completely. You think this makes you clever? No, I stepped closer. I think it makes you careless. You would destroy your own company to punish me. The company you purchased does not own my hotels. I ran those hotels. You stole from them. Daniel entered carrying financial records. Investigators traced $1.8 million to shell vendors connected to Kuroda Urban Partners. Rihanna snapped. Blake handled those transfers. Blake looked at her. You approved every account. I relied on your representations. You knew everything. Their partnership began collapsing in front of us. Conspirators are loyal while the future looks profitable. The moment consequences arrive, every secret becomes someone else's idea. Dr. Bell entered through the ballroom doors with another investigator beside him. His face was grey. Blake stared. "What is he doing here?" Marisol answered. Dr. Bell was intercepted attempting to destroy medical records. Bell shook his head. "I was correcting files." The investigator held up a sealed evidence bag. "Mr. Bell, you have the right to remain silent. I am a physician." "Not for much longer," I said. Blake moved toward me. "You ungrateful," an officer caught his arm. Blake resisted. The calm, patient man who had guided me through rooms disappeared. He shouted, cursed, and tried to pull free. The photographer kept taking pictures. "Turn that off," Blake yelled. The camera flashed again. He looked at me. "I loved you." I felt no anger then. Only exhaustion. "No," I said, "you loved standing near what I built. When that wasn't enough, you tried to erase me. You made me feel small. I gave you every opportunity to become larger. You never respected me. I trusted you with my life." He looked at the officers around him. "And now you've destroyed me." "No, Blake," I held his gaze. "You made a series of decisions. Tonight they became visible." The officers handcuffed him. Rena stood frozen beside the signing table. One investigator approached her. "Ms. Kuroda, you are being detained in connection with conspiracy, financial exploitation, wire fraud, and attempted unlawful confinement." She looked at me. "You'll lose the 29 million too. The courts will decide where the money goes. My family's property is collateral. You knew I was being drugged." Her face hardened. "You sat there pretending to understand nothing." "Yes, you humiliated me." I stepped closer. "You planned to send me to a locked facility after stealing my company." For the first time, Rena had no answer. The officers led her away. Blake passed me near the ballroom doors. He stopped. "This one tea, bring Claire back." A voice answered from behind me. "She's already here." Claire stepped out of the library. Blake's face changed. Claire approached him. "You told me she hated me." "Claire, listen, you sent messages from her account. She wasn't well. You hid my letters. I was protecting her. You were protecting yourself." Blake looked from Claire to me. "Everything I did was for this family." Claire laughed once. "No. Everything you did was so you could own what you never earned." The officer guided him away. Claire stood beside me as the ballroom emptied. Employees gathered near the walls. Board members whispered to their attorneys. The quartet packed his instruments. The orchids still looked perfect. The champagne remained cold. Betrayal leaves strange objects untouched. A broken glass can be cleaned in minutes. A marriage takes longer to remove from a room. Claire touched my wrist. "You need a doctor." "I've had enough doctors, a real one." "That would be an improvement." She smiled faintly. Then she looked around the ballroom. "What happens now?" "Mercer Heritage Operations is no longer licensed to use the name." "What about the employees?" "The trust will create a new operating company tomorrow morning." "Will everyone keep their jobs?" "That is the plan, and the buyer." Kuroda Urban Partners owns a company with $31 million in obligations. Claire raised an eyebrow. 29 million for 31 million in debt. They waived due diligence. That is the most expensive mistake I've ever heard of. Greed is rarely economical. The state froze the funds before they could leave escrow. Over the following weeks, investigators built cases against Blake, Rena, Dr. Bell, and 2 board members who had accepted promised bonuses in exchange for supporting the guardianship petition. The petition declaring me incompetent was dismissed. Independent doctors confirmed that my symptoms had been caused by medication, not dementia. The physical recovery was faster than the emotional one. Within 6 weeks my balance returned, my headaches faded, my memory improved. But I still woke some nights unsure whether the person beside me was safe. Then I remembered the bed was empty. I filed for divorce. Blake's attorneys argued that he had been manipulated by Rena. Rena's attorneys argued that Blake had misrepresented the company. Bell claimed he acted under pressure. Each of them discovered the same painful fact. Recorded conversations are difficult to reinterpret when the voices are clear. The criminal cases took months. Blake eventually accepted a plea agreement involving financial exploitation, coercion, medication tampering, fraud, and conspiracy to commit unlawful confinement. Rena fought the charges longer. Her family's investment accounts remained frozen, while authorities traced money through multiple companies. Dr. Bell lost his medical license before his trial began. 2 board members resigned. Another cooperated with investigators, and admitted that Blake had promised him a position after the sale. Publicly, the story became known as the Mercer Heritage Scandal. Reporters focused on the $29 million transaction, the secret trust, and the moment I stood from the wheelchair. People enjoy dramatic reversals, they prefer clean endings. Real life was less clean. I did not return to the office, and immediately become the woman I had been before. For months I questioned every decision. I reread emails 3 times. I asked assistants to confirm conversations in writing. I could no longer drink tea someone else prepared without watching the cup. Some injuries disappear from medical reports before they disappear from the body. Claire stayed in Seattle. At first she rented an apartment because neither of us knew how to live together again. We met for coffee twice a week. The conversations were awkward. Sometimes we discussed Blake. Sometimes we discussed the hotels. Sometimes we sat in silence, because 8 months of stolen communication could not be repaired by one emotional reunion. One afternoon, Claire placed a stack of architectural drawings on my kitchen table. "What is this?" I asked. "The west wing of the Astoria property. You redesigned it, only the public spaces." I studied the drawings. She had preserved the original timber framing while opening the interior to more natural light. It was thoughtful, restrained, beautiful. "You read good," I said. "I know." I laughed. She smiled. Then her expression became serious. "I don't want your position, I know. I don't want to be prepared to inherit an empire, I understand. But I would like to oversee preservation standards for the trust." I looked at her. "You want to work with me?" "I want to protect the buildings." That sounds familiar. Don't make it emotional. I wouldn't dream of it. She sat across from me. "And employees need representation on the trust board." "Already approved." "You approved it." The morning after the closing, Claire narrowed her eyes. "You thought I would ask," I hoped. For the first time since she returned, she reached across the table and took my hand without hesitation. 6 months after the closing, Claire and I traveled to Kyoto. I had not been back in more than 20 years. We walked through narrow streets near Higashiyama, while winter sunlight touched the tiled roofs. I showed her the warehouse where I once argued with contractors who believed a young American woman could not understand what they were saying. Claire laughed. "You've been doing that your whole life." "Doing what?" "Letting arrogant people underestimate you. It saves time." "No, it makes the revenge more dramatic." It was not revenge. She gave me a look. $29 million for $31 million in debt. Full disclosure was provided, of course. We stopped outside an old wooden townhouse being restored. Workers moved carefully behind the open entrance. Claire studied the joinery. "Do you miss who you were before Blake?" The question surprised me. "I don't know who that woman was anymore. Stronger, more trusting." "That doesn't mean weaker." "No." I looked at the house. "When people betray us, we sometimes punish the part of ourselves that believed them. We call trust stupidity. We call kindness blindness. Wasn't it? Sometimes, but Blake's choices were not created by my trust. They were only hidden by it." Claire was quiet. "I still feel stupid for believing his messages." "So do I." "What do we do with that?" "We learn without becoming cruel." She smiled faintly. "That sounds like something you would put on a hotel wall." "Only in the lobby." We continued walking. At the top of the hill, Kyoto opened beneath us, grey roofs and winter trees stretching toward the mountains. For months, Blake had convinced me that my mind was disappearing. He made me afraid of my own memory, my own hands, and my own judgment. But standing beside my daughter in the city, where I first learned to restore damaged things, I understood that I had not returned to the person I was before. I had become someone else, someone more careful. Someone less easily controlled. Someone who understood that silence could be a weapon when chosen freely, but a prison when imposed by others. The difference was ownership. Blake believed my silence meant I was weak. Rihanna believed my age made me invisible. Dr. Bell believed a medical title would make his lies sound like science. They were all wrong for the same reason. They confused stillness with surrender. I had not surrendered. I had listened. I had waited. I had gathered every pill, every transfer, every recording, every false signature, and every hidden letter. Then, when the truth was strong enough to stand without my anger holding it upright, I placed it in the center of the room and let them face what they had built. Justice did not give me back the months with Claire. It did not restore my marriage to the version I once believed in. It did not make me fearless. But it returned something more important. The right to define my own reality. That is what people like Blake take first, before the money, before the property, before the freedom. They take your trust in yourself. And that is why reclaiming your life begins long before a courtroom, an arrest, or a public victory. It begins the moment you stop asking the person hurting you to explain what is happening. It begins when you believe the evidence of your own eyes. It begins when you understand that remaining calm does not mean you have accepted defeat. Sometimes calm is how you survive long enough to win. Sometimes patience is not forgiveness, it is preparation. And sometimes the quietest person in the room is not the one who understands the least. She is simply waiting for everyone else to finish confessing.